Going to continue with Oneness versus the 1% by Vandana Shiva and Shiva. Being uprooted is considered to be the road to progress. That is why displacement is the most violent aspect of the current model of development. Every dam, every highway, every expanding city is predicated on a violent land grab, which results in protracted conflict, forced separation from our homes due to wars, often a consequence of the extraction of resources and of ecological degradation is becoming the dominant condition of our times. Images of refugees from Mexico, Syria and Africa are a reflection of this brutal uprooting. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, there are 65.6 million forcibly displaced people in the world today, and this number will grow as distorted economic development and wars over resources intensify. The second separation of humans from each others creates deliberate divisions within society engineered along the lines of constructed inequality based on gender, race, religion and wealth, and the conscious implementation of a divide and rule policy to maintain economic power for rich diversities are being turned into the basis of our conflicts. An economy of greed is spinning off a politics of hate and fear, threatening democracy and our humanity. As the 2016 US election showed, the 1% controls electoral democracy, extracts our intelligence and our autonomy to manipulate big data through artificial intelligence. Not only have the constructs that govern us and control our minds and our hearts separated us from nature, they have separated us from each other and even from our being. The third separation is from our sense of self, our false engineered sense of being. For the powerful, translates into uncontrollable greed and the search for unlimited, unregulated power. For the oppressed, it creates insecurity, fear, hate for the other and oneself. Violence becomes all-pervasive and structural, replicated every day in our ways of thinking and in the economic and political systems. The 1% essentially use separation to extract wealth and then use integration among and within themselves to restrict the concentration of the wealth. Different sectors of the economy are being merged for deeper and wider control and higher profits. Biotechnology, information technology, IT and financial technology have become one. Giant corporations are merging to create bigger cartels. Separation, the mechanical mind, the mechanical intelligence. The world we have created is a product of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking. Albert Einstein. The mechanical mind measures, predicts and approaches knowing, but cannot actually know because knowledge by its very nature is pluralistic. Privileging our system over all others and elevating reductionism as the only legitimate model of knowledge leads to violence against science itself. This epitemistic violence is now being combined with the violence of corporate interest to viciously attack all scientific traditions, including those that have evolved from within Western science and have through autopoietic epitemistic evolution transcended the limiting mechanistic worldview. Science as knowledge is being attacked, so the corporate science based on alternative facts and post-truth and spun by the PR machine of big money and corrupted governments can be used as a colonizing tool. The creation of the mechanical mind is based on the construction of multiple separations. It separates our soil from plants by defining soil as an empty container for receiving chemical fertilizers, and plants as machines that run on fertilizer fuel. It separates food from health. It separates land from air. The land use for atmospheric pollution and climate change. It separates knowledge and intelligence from the process of the life and living, and reduces knowledge to information and data. It separates genes from the self-organized living organisms and falsely assigns creative power to those who manipulate genes. It reduces life to intellectual property to be owned and monopolized, even if species are pushed to extinction and farmers are driven to suicide, according to the Manifesto on the Future of Knowledge Systems by the International Commission on the Future of Food and Agriculture. Consciously and unconsciously, the world has been equated in our mind to a huge machine, free to be improved and modified by humans, just as machines are assembled through the manipulation of their components. The same, we thought, can be done with the whole world, both living and non-living. This has led to the disruption of fragile and ecological processes vital for human survival. It was assumed that complete knowledge of the whole could be attained simply by the knowledge of its individual parts. This method, reducing the whole to a composite of its parts, was elevated from a methodologically with a practical scope to a theory and even an ideology, and the metaphor natural systems are like machines progressively became the much more radical natural systems are machines. Ernesto Gurriva, a peasant leader from Mexico, has called a mechanical ideology epistemic racism. One could also call it epistemic sexism. The urge to impose uniformity in agriculture, as well as artificial, fixed, narrow, negative identities in contest are conflicts with each other. It is imposed on the mechanical mind. It's an impulse of the mechanical mind. It assumes that there are experts with objective knowledge who are separate from and superior to ordinary men and women, peasants, workers, and experts in other knowledge traditions such as Ayurveda and agroecology, for instance. This separation is a knowledge apartheid. The mechanical mind is also a militarized mind. It is based on violence and leads to violence. It is ontologically violent because it declares nature is dead. It is epistemically violent because it destroys our capacity to think and act as part of nature, to be co-creators and non-violent. It is ecologically violent because through its ignorance, it disrupts processes that maintain the life of organisms, ecosystems, and the earth herself. It is socially violent because it is blind to and outlaws the embodied knowledge of women, peasants, and indigenous cultures that the world so desperately needs today to heal the planet and society. The mechanical mind is a privatizing mind. It contributes to enclosure of nature's commons, social commons, and the knowledge commons, promoting bioprivacy while appropriating, pirating, and patenting traditional knowledge. Is simultaneously constructs an artificial wall or creation boundary. Traditional knowledge is presented as innovation and invention and privatized via patenting. The mechanical mind locks causality into the straitjacket of linear, mechanical cause and effect, and action limited to contract. However, in living systems, causality is systemic, and properties and behaviour depend on context, on relationships, on complexity. It is four-dimensional causality, the integrated non-separability of living processes in space and time. Linear causality, on the one hand, allows claims to be made linking specific tools to complex multi-causal phenomena. In the Green Revolution narrative, Norman Borlaug's miracle dwarf wheat, bred with chemicals, increased food production in India, but as our studies show, an increase in the output of rice and wheat can be accounted for by increasing the area under production and improving irrigation. So land and water contributed to higher production, but this was falsely associated with new seeds and chemicals. Linear causality, when applied to complex systems, allows corporations producing harmful chemicals and GMOs to deny the harmful impacts of their products by falsely reducing complex, interactive living processes to one cause, one effect. The mechanical mind creates a false causality. This is how safety issues are manipulated and hazards are denied. This is how systems' effectiveness in paradigms based on system science are ignored and denied. The mechanical mind conveniently externalizes costs to society and nature through its linear constructs, narrative of conquest, mastery and progress. It separates cause as a system of structural violence from the effect of violence and harm to nature and people. In the process, it creates a system where the powerful who shape and use mechanistic tools for control appropriate absolute right with absolute irresponsibility. Ontological schizophrenia in another characteristic of the mechanical mind. The knowledge of how to make a product or develop a technology is separated from awareness of the impact of that product on technology, on nature and society. This translates into a separation of rights from responsibilities. GMOs represent ontological schizophrenia in the extreme when it comes to claiming intellectual property rights to seeds. When it comes and life forms, the GMO is claimed to be novel, an invention. When it comes to taking responsibility for biosafety, the impact of the GMO on the environment and health becomes sustainably equivalent to naturally occurring organisms and existing seeds and organisms. The same entity simultaneously constructed as novel and as totally new inventions when it comes to rights, ownership and collection of royalties, and as nature when it comes to avoiding responsibility for harm caused to nature and people. Furthermore, the rush of commodifying the commercialised a product or technology in the manufacture of systemic ignorance. Ignorance is the absence of knowledge. It is not science. True science requires a knowledge of systems. We are witnessing not just the merger of the giant corporations, which have their roots in the toxic cartel of the world wars, but a convergence of sectors in one unbroken continuum and consolidation of destruction and violent power. From biotechnology in agriculture to information technology and financial technologies, the coercion used against the diversity of indigenous cultures and their knowledge throughout colonial history is now being directed at civilized worldwide. The intelligence of nature and people is being replaced by the intelligence as surveillance, whether surveillance by Monsanto over farmers to prevent them from saving seeds, or surveillance by Facebook and Google over our everyday lives, or the surveillance of the corporate state over citizens seeking freedom. The latest endeavours of the mechanical mind is to reduce the world to fragments of information broken down further into data. Data are being treated as the new raw material, raw and simultaneously being given the status of intelligence. However, data is not knowledge, and data processing is not intelligence. Breaking free of the mechanical mind has now become an ecological and political imperative. The duty to care, the courage to stop the harm being caused by the 1% to the earth and its beings is part of life and living. The Hopi described the phenomenon of destroying everything that sustains a society as power quantity. If corporations have their way, our fragile web of life will be poisoned. The diversity of species will be driven to extinction. People will lose all freedoms to their seeds, to their foods, their knowledge and decision-making. And all social relations will be ruptured. The deep crises of exclusion and extinction invite us to unleash the living intelligence of all beings to heal and rejuvenate the planet and ourselves. This volume explores those processes and the economic models that is being imposed on the world, creating a 1% economy that has resulted in inhumane inequalities and a rapid and deep enclosure of the democratic space. Through what is happening to our planet, our resources, our money, our biodiversity, our food, we expose how these systems controlled by big money work and describe the future they are trying to engineer based on their vision of one science, one agriculture, one history, 1%. It also addresses the urgent need for creating alternatives to the big money world, to the rights of the earth and of humanity can be defended, reclaimed, deepened and enlarged, and we can foresee a future based on freedom and democracy. The awareness of our real identity as Earth's citizens and members of the Earth family is the beginning of the resurgence of real intelligence, real seed, real food, a real wealth, real freedom. It is the path to liberation and from the rule of the 1% that cripples our imagination and enslaves us. I'm going to leave it there for now.